It was so beautiful. The weather was divine.
Yeah.
Archie was just heaven.
This is now going to be recorded, guys. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
Cheers.
Yeah, lovely weather up in Perth, from what I see.
Gorgeous. Roll on vintage.
Yeah, definitely. No, we're looking really good at the moment. So maybe half a week behind where we would normally be. But the weather is sitting pretty in terms of what we've got coming up. So yeah, good yield, good flavours.
That exciting time of the year, like Christmas Eve.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been lots happening. So yeah, but all fun and games. Oh, Anna's back. That was a quick 90 seconds.
It is a quick 90 seconds. Hello, welcome. We've got members coming in now, which is really exciting. Thank you very much, members, for joining. I'll just allow a couple of seconds whilst you come in the room. For everyone who is joining for the first time, welcome. I'm so pleased. We've got lots of newbies joining us today, lots of people that haven't attended one of our tastings before, but equally we've got lots of our regulars. So I think that says a lot. It's a testament to the wines of Leeuwin Estate and Simone and Tim to be drawing in on this dreary Saturday. Lots and lots of new members who want to talk about these incredible wines. So thank you. Before I start and introduce them both, I would like to say that this event sort of came to fruition because I was lucky enough to have lunch with Simone and Tim a few months ago on a much sunnier London day and tasted through the wines. I must say I've never had the pleasure of tasting so many of their wines in one sitting, and immediately went to Freddie Bulmer, our buyer for Australia, who sadly can't be here today as he's in Austria on a buying trip. But I said, Freddie, what wines do we have? And he said, well, we've got a few. We were going to release them. And I said, don't release them yet. Please let me do a tasting. Let me please have the selection of wines that I tasted that you have chosen to have for sale. So luckily we managed to make these tasting packs. If you didn't manage to get a pack, please don't worry. We have got a couple left. You can email me after the event if you do want to buy one. I know a couple of members emailed me yesterday saying they'd missed out, but there really are only a handful left. They have flown off the shelves. So we have got 6 wines to taste, but we're also going to have a bit of an introduction to the estate as well. For anyone who is new to our Zoom sessions, we just keep the 3 of us on the screen for the event. There are some videos and there are some slides, which hopefully you'll be able to see. But if you want to communicate with your fellow members, I can already see some of you doing it. You use the chat function. I think everyone's done it correctly so far, yes. When you're using the chat, make sure you don't just select hosts and panelists, because then it will just be myself, Simone, Tim, and the lovely Mahesh behind the scenes that can see it. So you do need to make sure you select everyone. But I can see some people already starting. We've got people coming in from Scotland, it seems, Dorchester, York, Danbury, you name it. And really delighted, but I'm jealous about Simone and Tim, who are dialing in from Margaret River, which explains the strange tasting time today at midday, because they're actually dialing in from their evening. Tim has just come off the golf course and Simone has just come off the beach, they've just told me. So I'm furious. I've not even managed to make it outside today. It's sort of spitting with rain and I've been doing boring morning jobs. So without further ado, it gives me huge pleasure, absolutely enormous pleasure, to welcome Simone from the founding family of Leeuwin Estates and Tim, who is the winemaker there. They make the most incredible duo, I have to say. They like to talk and chat as much as I do about wine. They are passionate. They are so engaged in what they do. And I think more than many other wine brands in the world, they put this magic twist on top of everything. Everything's done with excellence, it's done with precision, but it's also done with this artistic flair, which comes through obviously on the very famous labels of their wines. We're lucky we've got back vintages. This isn't something that is around a lot for consumers, these back vintages of their wines. So it's going to be an absolute pleasure to hear from Simone and taste along with Tim today. So first things first, I'm going to hand over to Simone. I've got my Chardonnay ready to go, so I'm going to cheers you, Simone, and thank you both so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Anna, and it's such a delight to be here. We in Western Australia were the island state in Australia where we had our borders locked, closed, and we couldn't leave Western Australia for a very long time. And when our borders opened, the very first trip I did was straight to London, and then I was back there again in October with Tim. So I've done 2 visits and Tim's done 1 in the last 12 months, and it's a really important market to us, the UK. It was our very first export market. But when I reflect back on the story of Leeuwin, for me, it's really been an accidental winemaking journey. It wasn't something that was set out with any kind of foresight into how we got into it as a family. It really happened by making the most of incredible opportunities that came our way. So back in the late 1960s, my father, who is a chartered accountant, was working in mergers and acquisitions, and he had the opportunity to purchase a high-rise industrial plumbing business. And when he looked into the detail of it, it came with a 1,650-acre parcel of land in Margaret River, very close to his favourite surf beach. And I was the first of 4 children to be born in 5 years, and Dad was certainly not getting very much time for surfing. So he took Mum down there, and they fell in love with how beautiful this parcel of cattle farmland was. So he did the whole M&A deal, sold off the industrial company, and we walked away with this parcel of land, which became the backdrop for a childhood utopia. So the farm, as we still call it as a family, it's located 3 hours drive south of Perth, which is where I live. And Perth is the world's most isolated capital city. So when you drive 3 hours further south, you really are in one of the world's most isolated wine regions. And it is pristine, it is beautiful, it is surrounded by oceans on 3 sides. The soils are, even though it's one of the world's New World wine regions, the soils are some of the most ancient in the world. They're Precambrian, 750 million years old. They're granite with a clay subsoil. And over millions of years, this granite island, it used to be an island, crumbled as the oceans rescinded. And it just happens to be ideal for viticulture. But back when Mum and Dad purchased the cattle farm, there were 4 doctors that were starting to plant grapes further south than us. And Mum and Dad didn't even know about that until Robert Mondavi came knocking on their door with an inquiry about whether they would consider selling the land. And he'd been commissioned by New World investors to find the next great site for making New World wines. So the long and the short of that story was Robert and his son Tim became Mum and Dad's mentors in setting up Leeuwin Estate, which was an incredible introduction to the world of winemaking. And being a chartered accountant, chartered accountants have mission statements, and Mum and Dad launched Leeuwin Estate with the mission statement to produce wines that would rank with the best in the world through the pursuit of excellence. And so right from the very beginning, our focus has always been on very low volume, but very, very high quality wines. And we're 2 generations now, and my daughter Lucy is also in the business, and my kids are very involved in understanding the business while they're doing their own careers as well. But it's been a wonderful learning journey, but focusing on excellence is all that we will ever do. And that's a privilege to be in that scale, being in the fine wine industry. So Leeuwin Estate, being close to the oceans and on undulating rolling hills, which are between 40 and 80 metres above sea level, has given us a number of different aspects and soil profiles. So we produce Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon and Shiraz. So you can see the undulating hills in that slide. And they've been carved up by the Butchered Up Brook, which runs through our property. And that is one of the aspects that makes our vineyard site quite unique. So low volume, and those varietals are what we make, and we release our wines under the Siblings and the Prelude and the Art Series labels. So the Art Series that you'll be tasting tonight, they represent our most age-worthy and opulent wines. And we very much believe that winemaking is a science as well as an art. So we commission Australian artists, or we purchase their paintings with copyright approval, and each time we release a new vintage from the Art Series wines, aside from the Riesling, which have 4 frogs on them, we have a different Australian artist on the label. And that is what other wineries may call their reserve collection. We call that our art series collection. And they're incredibly age-worthy wines. So they do extremely well in the auction market. But what I always encourage people to do is we always hold them back for release. So 2019 is our current release Art Series Chardonnay, and 2018 is our current release Art Series Cabernet. So we hold them back to the start of their best drinking window, but they are incredibly age-worthy and they will go for 20 or 30 years. So enjoy them now in their youth, where they're full of energy, line, length, structure, and still beautifully balanced. But as they age and they get those lovely secondary, tertiary characteristics coming out, their opulence, and that they show themselves and they keep unfolding and telling their story. So Art Wine, we have a restaurant. We celebrate wine pairing, and obviously the best way to try wine is in great company in a beautiful setting. And what we do at Leeuwin is we use West Australian delicacies as close to the point of origin as we can to complement our wines with our wine menus. And another important part of our philosophy is about being low interventionist, and we are accredited with Sustainable Wine Growing Australia through our vineyard operations as well as our winery operations. And that low impact on the environment, protecting our environment and producing these beautiful balanced wines that reflect their terroir and their climate is what we're all about. I think another part that is a joy for us as a family, but also a really fundamental part of Leeuwin's success is we have only ever had 3 senior winemakers since our first vintage in 1979, and only 2 senior viticulturalists. So we're lucky as a family that we've got this incredible parcel of land, but if you don't put the right people around it that share your philosophy and your vision and your energy, we would still be feeding cattle and going to the beach and going surfing in our holidays. Instead, when we bring the right people together, we've been able to create a little bit of wine magic around this parcel of land when we respect it and we nurture it. And every year we learn something new. So what's exciting me the most at the moment, being second generation, and I'm very lucky to co-CEO Leeuwin with my brother Justin, but we have been undertaking some new vineyard plantings across the last few years. And to do that today with the knowledge that we have, because Leeuwin was one of the very pioneering vineyard sites planted in Margaret River back in 1975 and 1976. But now, with all the knowledge we have about soil sites, aspects, clones, to go in with the technical team that we work alongside today, and to have planted those vineyards in the last few years, and to see the quality of fruit that's already coming off at a very early stage from those fruits, just gives me confidence that what we're doing as Tim and I and the whole team, where you are in wine is always a very long-term vision. So what we're doing today is setting up Leeuwin for next generations and that pursuit of excellence and taking our wines to the world. So the foundations were incredibly strong, but the best is always yet to come. So we're really excited about where the wines are now, but super passionate about what else we can do and what we can do as a very young wine business that's been very fortunate to have had our wines ranked alongside the world's best at such an early stage in our development. So I think, given that we're going to start with tasting Art Series Chardonnays, when we were in COVID and we couldn't travel, we made a couple of short videos. So we'd like to, that's our art gallery where we have all our art on display, and a little food and wine pairing shop there. So if you visit Leeuwin, this used to be our barrel room and we've converted it into an art gallery, and it also doubles as a function space so that we can showcase the paintings on our labels. And they certainly tell a really wonderful story of Australian fine art. But we'll show Chardonnay because I think this is a lovely way to bring you to our site. And for me, there's so many incredible wines all around the world, but I always think the best way to truly discover a wine is when you have the opportunity to visit the place where it's made, to see the soils, to see the light, to see the way the vineyards are planted, and to meet the people and understand the philosophy and passion behind the wines. It's like book club without the books, but with a really great glass of wine to enjoy. And that's our story. So we'll we'll go to the Chardonnay video, and then so grateful for Tim to join on this Saturday night, and he will talk you through the wines that you're going to taste. So thank you very much for joining.
Thank you, Simone.
Great wines are grown and not made. Leeuwin Estate Art Series Chardonnay really details the fabric of the site and the soil and the environment where we exist. Margaret River is one of the most unique wine regions in the world, where we're bound by the Indian and the Southern Ocean. We have this natural maritime influence.
There is incredible consistency in the fruit because the vines aren't pushed here. We have a sea breeze that cools down hot summer days. Our soils are sandy clay loam with lots of gravel sitting on granite. It's free draining, but it's lean. It's not too rich. And when it comes to harvest time, that really is expressed into the fruit. You can almost feel the landscape in the grapes and in the vines.
All of Art Series Chardonnay is gin clone. It's hen and chicken, big berries, small berries. The bigger berries are a slightly delayed ripening berry, which carry all the acidity, all that line and structure. Smaller berries carry all the power and the concentration.
The genesis of Art Series Chardonnay was in the mid-1970s in the planting of Block 20, followed soon after by Block 22. By the time we released our first Art Series Chardonnay in 1980, it was evident the outstanding quality of fruit these sites were capable of producing. We're very excited to be releasing our 2018 Art Series Chardonnay.
2018 epitomised one of the most fantastic vintages we've ever been involved with. What we received from Mother Nature that year was these beautiful growing conditions, but also the perfect ripening conditions. We've looked at this one in the vineyard through its fermentation and maturation at 100% new French oak, and then through its 2 years of maturing in bottle.
In its youth, beautiful purity and clarity of fruit, cut lime, pear, nectarine,
But also, when you taste it, the nose goes with it. Beautiful aromatic chamomile spice.
It's a wine of incredible poise and balance and elegance and complexity, and hallmark of this wine and all Art Series Chardonnays is the incredible length on the palate.
as you see those wines unfold and unravel for 10, 20, 30 years, we see a marginal diminishing of those primary fruits, but then a building of those secondary and tertiary layers. It just screams passion for me.
Thank you so much, Simone. That was amazing.
So you can see why we
video. Now, I think if I'm right in thinking, we are actually ready to move on to Tim and the tasting. I can actually see, ironically, another member called Tim has already kicked off. I think we're all salivating so much after watching that I'm not surprised if you've already gone on to Wine One. I certainly don't blame you. But I'm going to hand over to Tim now. And again, thank you, Simone. That really was the most fabulous introduction. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. I hope that you can all hear me loud and clear. I think where we sit in the isolation of Margaret River is really in the detail about how special and remarkable this region really is. And as Simone touched on before, being surrounded by the Indian and the Southern Oceans, where we get that kind of cooling breeze with the Southern Ocean coming off the Antarctic, and then this kind of moderating breeze with the Indian Ocean to our west. We have this really beautiful consistency of ripening conditions. And I think when you put it into context, basically in 1975, the first Chardonnay vines were planted on the estate at Leeuwin, and they were planted out to a gin clone, which does have like bunch morphology, which is hen and chicken, or améliorandage in French, where you got bigger berries, smaller berries. So you've got this beautiful kind of gliding pendulum really between concentration and power with the chickens, the smaller berries, and then moving into the bigger berries, which kind of carries this kind of consistency and core and this thread laced acidity that comes through. So it's this beautiful harmony overall. So I think when we look at Leeuwin and we look at block 20 and block 22, which is what we've just seen in the video, aspect, there's a little bit of altitude, but it's more about aspect. A portion of block 20 is non-irrigated, so it's dry grown. So the vines themselves, the roots tend to kind of punch a little bit lower into the clay subsoils that Simone spoke about before. It gives this greater concentration and purity. And I don't know, philosophically for me, my role is more about translating what we have in the vineyard to what we eventually see in the glass. And that takes a lot of science and research and everything and art, but it's not trying to do too much. It's about paying respect and paying homage to what we see overall. And it's not about winemaking artifact. It's about protection. It's about nurture and respect overall. And I think when I see Art Series Chardonnay in the glass, especially on release, I want to see perfume. I want to see white blossom. The fruit spectrum should be in a line to pear, cut lime, white nectarine. That's the genesis. That is the nucleus of what we're about. And then everything that kind of goes from there, whether it's oak, which I'll talk about a lot throughout, and also just solids kind of amplifying that translation to the glass and kind of having these kind of subtle, almost kind of nutty nougat kind of notes that kind of comes through. And I think the first wine, you'll probably see that a little bit more with the 2017. So it's 5 years from harvest essentially. And what I do love about the 17 and 19 shown side by side, so it's a vintage comparison, a vintage vertical, is that the environmental conditions are pretty much almost are quite aligned. So the moderates are cool. So with that, you will see this really neat profile between fruit and acidity that really does come through. So just getting involved a little bit more in the winemaking side of things and production. It's all hand harvested fruit. So, and we start picks at first light, 5:30 to 6 o'clock in the morning. And then all of those bunches are carried into the winery where we'll we'll de-stem a lot of the individual berries overall, and then it'll go into skin contact in press. So it'll be chilled down to about 0 degrees. And what we're looking to do by this process is amplifying. So what we have a platform, and if we can create more skin contact, then we energize and we create greater intensity and concentration overall. So that'll be one side of it, and then the other side will be whole bunch pressing. So that's where we get beautiful solids that kind of come in. So those kind of characters that I spoke about before, that kind of nougat aspect, that kind of nuttiness that comes through. But really, it stems from our site. Block 20 and Block 22, they are they're the backbone. They are the two backbone blocks behind Art Series Chardonnay and its site. It's isolation, it's soil, it's oceans, and we have great consistency vintage to vintage in terms of what we see. So, we rarely get beyond say 35 degrees in Margaret River, but our nighttime temperature is pretty much ambient. So the diurnal temperature difference is quite small. So we're not kind of like really high in daytime or really low at nighttime. It's really moderated, which gives us really beautiful consistency overall.
And Tim, if you don't mind me jumping in, if members are tasting along as you talk, you've mentioned we've got the 17 and the 19, and you just mentioned that you do have this consistency. So we're not really looking for huge amounts of vintage variation here, are we? We're almost looking like slight evolution of the wines.
Yeah, definitely. I that's a really good question, Anna. And I think one of the most special points about Margaret River as a whole, like we're the most southwestern tip of Western Australia and Australia as a whole. So we're completely buffered by the course of 3 borders of water. But obviously that's the Indian and the Southern Ocean. And we don't have too much vintage variation. If you were to look at other regions within Australia, wine growing regions within Australia, it peaks and troughs. It's a parabola. And when we say it's a moderate to cool or moderate to warm, it's like we're splitting hairs. Like it's luxurious to be growing great Chardonnay and Cabernet and Shiraz in this kind of ideal world. It's a paradise. And I've just come back from McLaren Vale and Adelaide Hills, and kind of going through, yields and, hail, and it's just like we don't get that. And I think that really reflects in the glass, and I think that's so rewarding as a consumer and taster, but also as a small element of my role to be able to articulate that in the glass. And there's not one day that I just go, wow, you got to pinch yourself, because we don't see those environmental differences. And wine to me is a story. Like it details what our environmental conditions are. It details what we're doing in the vineyard, the site that it's planted on. It's a reflection. It's a mirror, and it mimics everything that you see environmentally. Like we can talk about wine going, oh my God, amazing, but it's defined, and it echoes everything overall. And the most important thing from my side is to ensure that there's consistency on all the way through.
And so for members who are tasting these two side by side, first of all, lucky members, I feel really lucky. For me, and it's just my personal opinion, and members were really keen in the chat to hear what you think as well. For me, number 1 had exactly as you said, Tim, a little bit more of that nougat, a little bit more of that kind of nutty character. And then interestingly, 19 for me still feels so, they both feel unbelievably fresh. You can tell they're going to go forever. But 19, one member has just said more lime, and I certainly get that. And lime leaf, kaffir, those sorts of aromas. But also, interestingly, I can smell a little bit more of that new oak. And you mentioned you were going to talk about oak, and I don't want to jump the gun, but I can smell a little bit more of the oak on number 2, whereas perhaps it's integrated a little bit more on the older wine. Would that be a reasonable assessment?
Yeah, I think the what I love about all of our wines and is definitely articulated with Chardonnay is that wine lives. It's not as soon as we bottle, then that's it. Like it evolves, it unravels, and the contours and textures start to take play. And that's what I love about the 17 is that it's kind of shifting its frame a little bit, where it's really quite complex, but not foregoing its primary fruit in terms of that fruit spectrum that I spoke about before. And the 19 in comparison is like white blossoms, it's vitality, it's energy, it's pop and spark. And that's where has got that line, but it's also the purity of the 19 is it's in its infancy is probably the best way to put it, and then the 17's got its complexity. So it's all kind of wrapped up in 19, and now it's starting to evolve in 17, which is the first wine. And they're coming from, like, climatically, environmentally, they're coming from very similar vintages, and it's kind of like, you know, you've got the idea about how 19 is actually going to unfold, because it's kind of 17's little taster overall. So yeah, the definition is definitely within the fruit, soil, Precambrian overall, and the identity and the DNA of the block. And then from there, I spoke about skin contact with Art Series Chardonnay and some whole bunch pressing for solids. And then it comes down to barrel fermentation to lead off on your question, Anna. So it's all barrel fermented in 100% new French Coopered oak. The oak regime that we focus on at Leeuwin is, well, to call it a puzzle is, underestimation. There's a lot of research and science. I could talk about French oak for about 3 years. We adopt for Art Series Chardonnay 100% new, all Bordelais Coopered oak, and that is based upon its grain tightness and lower toasting threshold as well. Each Cooper or Tannellery will have their own kind of footprint on the wine, whether it be 1 for structure all the way through, or 2 for aromatics and lift and perfume, or 3 for retention of acidity that runs all the way through. And there are certain barrels that will be paired with block 20, top or bottom. I'll tend to be OCD and split everything like beyond. And my cell hands don't like me that much, but
One of the most exciting days in our whole annual calendar is when all these small parcels that have all had their oak selected based on their fruit profile come in, and we do the classification tasting, and that's when you see the rewards from this really small batch, really intricate philosophy. And Tim and his guys have done so much work on oak selection. And if anyone ever has the chance to go into a barrel room in a winery and taste the impact of the different oaks on the different parcels of fruit, it's quite extraordinary. So that's when the weave and the puzzle all comes together on that magical day in late October, early November every year, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty much the highlight calendar tasting. So assemblage is done through 30 to 40 parcels of Chardonnay, dumb lines, and we go around the table and we look at it, we orchestrate everything, and we produce a wine that really excels in its purity and clarity of fruit overall, and the length and the carry overall. Sorry, my dog's just trying to make his bed at the moment. So yeah, that's what it comes down to. It's the most exciting day on the calendar, and when I see it get put in, you know that there's going to be some excitement going around.
And the second most exciting day is probably about a month away, and this is like our version of Christmas Eve in a vineyard. And the closest thing I've ever seen to the excitement, almost like a grown man on an Easter egg hunt, is going into block 20 with David Winstanley, who's our viticulturalist. And interestingly, David was a geologist before he became a viticulturalist, so his knowledge of site and soils is extraordinary. But we went under the nets and we were trying different sizes of different bunches on the eve of the harvest, and it's probably the most expensive breakfast I've actually ever had. But that excitement that the fruit is ripe now, let's go in, and the hand pickers come in, and it all comes together. So for us, harvest it's been a cool summer this year, hasn't it, Tim? But as we said, you know, it's not very big extremes in our weather patterns here, but 4 to 6 weeks, you know, we'll begin harvest.
Yeah, no, we'll be rocking and rolling kind of, you know, late first week of February, early second week, which is, yeah, a little bit behind, but it's nothing in comparison. I was out a month or two ago and smelling the flowers on Block 20 Chardonnay, and I'm not sure if anyone's ever done it that's listening at the moment, but when you see Block 20 and it's flowering, it smells like honey. Like, it is literally honey. And you walk through the rows after, and it is this most glorified, beautiful purity and smell that it takes you in. And that's when you know the excitement's beginning. So yeah, it's a exciting time. So just touching on the 17 and 19 Art Series Chardonnay as well, just kind of deflecting a little bit. So no malolactic fermentation at all with those two vintages. So the focus is preservation of acidity without the distraction of kind of lactic kind of diacetyl kind of notes or kind of broadening of the palate. So we've got balanced acidity, so we don't need to deacidify with malolactic fermentation, and with that weekly batonnage, so the whipping up of the yeast leaves, that kind of creates the texture, and it's also kind of bringing in the fruit spectrum to the acidity to the oak, kind of acts as a conduit. So everything should be well and truly in balance and in check. And total time in oak, looking at about 11 months. So we're basically, next week we're going to take out our 2022 Art Series Chardonnay out of oak, which is even greater excitement to what we're looking at the moment. So yeah, with that, it's pretty simple, and just balance, elegance, harmony, symmetry, focus, defined. But yeah, that's the recipe.
They're absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Just one question from me, and then I've got two from members. I apologise. There's like a touch of salinity that I'm getting a little bit more in the 2017. Would you say that's batonnage that's bringing that? That's kind of, it's this beautiful kind of sea spray that I'm getting a touch of.
Yeah. I'm picking up what you're putting down. I kind of almost call it this kind of petrichor character, which is like kind of rain on earth. I think where we sit in terms of geographical space, obviously we do have the Indian and Southern Ocean, and but also I think it does come down to the lateritic iron-rich gravel. So Precambrian bedrock granite in the tertiary, it kind of washed away. So you do kind of pick up these mineral characters, one from soil, but two in terms of proximity to the ocean as well. Yeah, you know, I think like where I sit here, 7 kilometers to the Indian Ocean, like, so we are impacted a little bit oceanic wise, but there is this kind of saline, kind of brine, almost iodine kind of aspect. You don't want it to be overpowering, but you in the background, it kind of has this beautiful harmony, and this kind of this nuance is probably the best way to put it. But yeah, I think it's a thread. It's not through all of the iconic producers of Margaret River, but definitely within our house, within our family, and within our sites, it is definitely a thread.
Amazing, thank you. And before we go on to the Cabernets, and I'm sure we've got plenty of people excited to have 3 beautiful Cabernets at 12:30 on a Saturday. I know I am. Just a couple of questions. One was from Alistair asking what size the oak was that you were putting the Chardonnay in.
I was just looking at that on the narrative. So all of the oak barrels that we use for Artillery Chardonnay and Prairie Chardonnay, to be honest, is 225 or 228. So they're barriques. So we don't tend to use any larger format for Chardonnay because, and is a take-home message, because our fruit that we receive is so concentrated and intense. We need to have a smaller oak barrel because that provides more structure to the wine. If we were to go to a larger oak barrel, then all you would see would be fruit. And there's this beautiful balance and focus and symmetry that oak needs to match fruit. I'm not saying that we don't use larger formats. We do, and we'll see that in Shiraz. We do overall. And then if you were to flick over to other wine regions around Australia where their fruit is not as intense for Chardonnay, then they'll use larger format barrels because they don't have the intensity and concentration that we have, that luxury that we have. So it's all 225 Bordelais or 228 Burgundian Cooper Oak.
Fantastic, thank you. And then one last question was, obviously we're tasting 2 in the world of Leeuwin quite young vintages in the grand scheme of how they could age. And one member has asked, does your Chardonnay sort of go through phases where it's more open, more closed? I know it's quite a challenging concept. It's something I certainly struggle with a bit. So what's your experience of the aging of your Chardonnays?
Well, like for me, Chardonnay is about a journey. Like I don't think that there's one other varietal that can really kind of exemplify its journey overall. It doesn't, for me, Chardonnay does not have a hole. It just takes it's kind of, it's like walking up a hill and then you kind of you deviate to left and right, but it's not like you go into the valley and it's like, oh, I'll see that in 2 years' time. It doesn't do that, because if you look at it on release, vitality, energy, pop and spark, that is 19 Artillery Chardonnay. And then it really, sorry if I get too passionate about this, but the primary fruits slightly diminish, but then that is taken over by complexity and layers and contours that kind of create volume, the capacity on the palate, or the complexity on the nose will start to shift. Like the 17, you'll see kind of those kind of nuttiness or those kind of nougat characters. The fruit's still there because it's so strong. That is the foundation. They're the pillars behind the wine. And when you take into account plantings in 1975, the first Chardonnay plantings in Margaret River on the estate, and the clone gin, it's all set up for this wine to age. Forget about 10 years. We're looking at 20 to 30 years, easy. And that also, the backbone behind that is on the palate, that beautiful natural acidity that hasn't been interfered with malolactic fermentation, but we kind of bring everything together with batonnage overall. So yeah, it's an amazing wine, and to see
we were drinking 2004 on Christmas Day, and it was delicious.
Stop it. Where was my invitation?
I'm back down next week. I've got another bottle. Come up to the house.
Oh, very, very jealous. But members who are interested and who like to cellar wines, I actually cannot name you a better estate in the entire of Australia to cellar. They're built to last, like you say, Tim. That's in their DNA.
Yeah.
But I think
And,
the
like,
hallmark, if you had to say the hallmark of Leeuwin Chardonnay, though, to me, it's that extraordinary length on the palate. You know, just that elegance and balance, but that length that just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, I'm still tasting it, which seems a shame, but I'm also excited to move on to the Cabernet. I'll lose the beautiful length I've still got on the Chardonnay, but I am excited. We've got 3 Cabernet Sauvignons to taste, which is an unbelievable treat. And all 3 are actually for sale and were launched this morning, members. So I apologise. I've on the list I sent all the members, I put £42 for the first Cabernet. It's actually £42.50, so you'll have to forgive me. But we've got the 16, the 17, and the 18 all in a row. So I'll hand over to you, Tim. I think probably I can send. Should I send the Cabernet video around afterwards? I'm conscious of time. So there is another video, members, for the Cabernet, but in the interest of time and having this flight and the Shiraz to talk about, I think I'll send it in the follow-up email if that's all right with you both, Simone and Tim.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. Bang, done. I was just thinking it would set the scene if
I can do it. I can do it.
I don't know. Are you okay with that, Simone?
Yeah. We just don't want to go longer than everyone, but that's great.
Well,
if everyone wants
we can
to
run.
try tasting wine while
Members won't mind running over a couple of minutes, I'm sure.
If you everyone need to turn down
your ovens for lunch,
video, and then Tim will talk you through them.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We've already had people say they're happy, so yeah, lovely. Okay, I'll pop the video on, and if you just bear with me a moment.
Perfect.
And then I will hand over to you, Tim, afterwards. So here we go.
Leeuwin Estate's Cabernet Sauvignon is really the story of people and place. It began when my parents purchased this property as cattle farmland back in 1969, and then began putting a team together to pioneer the vineyards from the mid-1970s.
Great wines are a reflection of their site. There's great history here. The Leeuwin Cabernet vineyards are sculpted by the Budgenup Brook. It's a critical piece of our soil and wine story. It has made Leeuwin Estate one of the great estates of the world.
Margaret River is one of the most isolated wine regions in the world. We exist in the southwest corner of Western Australia, bound by the Indian Ocean and the Southern Ocean. We enjoy a beautiful Mediterranean climate, and we have the added benefit of the maritime influence, which gives us a long, even ripening period.
The Budgenup Brook has exposed the ancient granites of the Leeuwin Block. On top of that, we have free-draining, gravelly and lateritic soils. The vines are in tune with their environment. They're dry-grown, modest yield. They express the soil. The fruit that we get is sweet, has intensity, and at harvest, incredible tannin ripeness.
Leeuwin Estate Art Series Cabernet is autumn selection clone. It's all about physiological tannin ripeness. It is the pedigree, it's the foundation. And then from the vineyard into the winery, it's about nurturing those tannins. There are so many hours by a greater team in the vineyard and in the winery to create great Cabernet that is expressive of site.
It's the story of everybody who's come before, what they have learned along the way, and the accumulation of that knowledge being passed through the generations is allowing us to create the wines that we're making today.
It's all about that beautiful symmetry between that blackcurrant, dark cherry fruit spectrum with the aromats. Bay leaf, dried sage, lavender, they're the characters that we are precisely looking for with Leeuwin Estate Cabernet.
We're capturing our ancient gravelly soils. We're reflecting our proximity to the oceans. We're looking for beautiful opulence, deep black fruit flavours, and creating wines that have the incredible capacity to age wonderfully.
Fabulous. Thank you very, very much. Oh, I want to be back there again.
I think the details in the video Cabernet, wow. Margaret River expresses this beautiful synergy with Bordeaux with regards to three aspects, three pillars, and that is the maritime influence that we experience, the free draining soils that we have, which is based upon granite overall, and then the heat summation overall. We're a touch warmer than Bordeaux, and Cabernet was the first varietal that was planted in Margaret River, and it's so expressive. In similar vein to Chardonnay, it probably echoes and mirrors the environmental conditions more than any other varietals that we exist in. And you've got a really cool lineup with regards to 16, which is kind of moderate to warm, 17 it's kind of moderate to cool, and then 18 is kind of like this beautiful classical vintage that we have. And in a warmer vintage, you'll see more of those, as I spoke about in that video, more of those kind of black currant, darker cherry fruit nuances, and in a cooler vintage like 17, you'll see a little bit more lift in the perfume and the fragrance overall, and this kind of almost this minerality, this kind of graphite thread that kind of comes through. It's kind of like, so it's packed full of energy. And when you've got warm, when you've got cool, and then you got 18, and it's just like that has got both of those aspects that come together. So the first vines that were planted in the region in Margaret River was in 1967. First vines that were Cabernet that was planted on the estate of Leeuwin was in 1975. I did speak briefly in that video about the Horton selection clone. So it's a really, it's a smaller, I think when you talk about bunch morphology, like the berries are like super small. And again, it's all about, as opposed to Chardonnay, where we're picking on fruit spectrum, where we're picking on physiological tannin ripeness, excuse me, for Cabernet Sauvignon. And when you look at, we spoke about block 20 with Art Series Chardonnay, we're looking at block 8 for Art Series Cabernet, and that is a non-irrigated or dry grown vineyard of Cabernet that we have, which is facing kind of southeastern, facing slope on contours. So they're not kind of north, south, east, west. They're kind of wrapped around the actual contour of the aspect. And when you do have non-irrigated or dry grown vineyards of Cabernet, all your intensity is built within the skins. So you have more skin to juice ratio. So you have greater intensity overall. And that should really be showcased in like a good Margot. Cool. Thank you, Roger. Definitely. Awesome, Julien. You have greater concentration of fruit because everything's built within the skins, because the berry size is smaller because it's non-irrigated overall. The way that we amplify that in the winery is focusing on cold soaking first before we go into fermentation. So to stabilize color, to stabilize tannin, ultimately flavor, without the presence of alcohol. So what I'm looking to do is to extract as much as I can out of the fruit without the presence of alcohol. So I'm taking out all the water-based polyphenols, which is jargon basically, but I can do that. And then we initiate fermentation, and then we hold for maybe 3 or 4 weeks post fermentation. To the tannins can be really chunky at the end of fermentation, but if you leave it on skins after the tannins resolve and they become to silken, or become silky, I should say, overall. And that's the most important thing. We don't want aggressive tannins. It just needs to be managed, and that's what we do. So all of these 3 vintages are matured for a period of 23 months in barrel, and it's all Bordelais Cooper barrel, 22 mil staves. Like with Chardonnay, every barrel has its place. Like focusing on aromatics, perfume, acidity, tannin, structure is incredibly important, especially the Cabernet, because it's highly, it's a high phenolic varietal overall. But the most important thing is to respect the identity of where our best Cabernet is grown, and that is Block 8. It stretches into Block 9 and Block 10 as well, and that is the founding formulation of what you're looking in the glass at the moment. And you'll see subtle deviations just in terms of environment, and whether it's slightly warmer or slightly cooler overall. But that's the most gravitating thing for me, is it showcases and it expresses the landscape of where we sit overall. And you know, inside the winery, it's about having that consistency overall. But yeah, 16, wow, I love the 16. 17, I love the perfume, I love the brilliance of it. 18, it's like head and shoulders. It's kind of like flesh around the bone. It's got that structure, but it's got weight. They're 3 amazing wines.
It's a wonderful lineup, and I think you summed it up perfectly at the beginning, Tim, where you sort of said you've got that rich, dark fruited, almost mocha-esque, very intense wine 3, which is the oldest, and by your, well, if I have understood you correctly, the slightly warmer of the years, the 2016. And then you go into this, very aromatic, almost floral violet lift.
Yeah,
so
bring it.
Yeah.
So good.
Completely different. And then number 5 feels exactly as you said, almost like they all came together and just you've got the best of both worlds. And John has made a wonderful comment saying, of the 3, the 2018 is my favorite because of the depth, but all are clearly from the same vineyard, which isn't always the case when tasting other wines. And I think that's so true. Although there's variation between these 3, there is this consistency. And I think part of that actually for me is that texture. There's a mouthfeel on all 3 that I find very unifying.
Yeah, John's got the hammer. He just nailed it. It's so true.
Well done, John. You get the thumbs up from him. Simone, would you agree?
Yeah, look, the Cabernet journey is really very exciting to us, and I will jump in here with the fact that this technical team is so talented, and if they wanted to, they could pull out a few winemaking artifices and construct wines in a certain way. But the whole philosophy behind what we do is respecting site and capturing the nuances of each vintage and that beautiful parcel of fruit every year, and respecting that. And I think that you can absolutely see the hallmark of the Leeuwin house style and quality across these 3 wines, but you are seeing this, the nuances of the vintage, and each wine speaks to its own journey in its own place. So yeah.
I think that's a really important point, is that there's not that much winemaking artifact that's overlaid on the wines that we're looking at today or tonight. It's about respect, and it's about an understanding of the landscape overall, and is allowing the fruit to express itself in the best way, in a diligent way.
But Tim makes that sound very, very simple like that. But the amount of work. So again, these vineyard sites broken down into very small individual parcels of fruit, that there's a lot of leaf removal to provide, extra sunlight on the morning side. Hugely labor intensive. And then the amount of knowledge that's gone into oak selection for each small parcel, that's how you get that lovely tapestry that comes together in the quality of the wines that come out. So it is very respectful of site and not winemaker interference, but winemaker understanding of that site, and oak selection is what is making these wines sing like they do.
I think that the encapsulating example is how easily Tim just talks about the blocks as if they just chuck the whole thing in, pick the whole lot and put it in some barrels.
But I also know what goes behind the scenes with these guys, and they're like tasting all the time and thinking, and they're way ahead of where it's going to be, and they're looking at weather patterns with where we're at now, with when vintage is going to be, and these red wines won't be harvested for a little while longer now, but it's already started well and truly now, well before harvest, with what the Cabernet for the 2023 vintage will encapsulate. And when I go back quite a long time, if it was a slightly cooler year, there would be more like, but now there's just as much excitement in that year as there is in a slightly warmer year. And again, it's a very small range that it comes in, because this oak is better on this parcel now, and it's the science that goes into the art of winemaking is huge. Yeah, and that's where the passion lies, and that is why we will learn something every single year, because they're always doing barrel trials with new producers, and there's so much intellect that's going on, which makes it really exciting. Yeah. But the next one I'm going to throw out, because Tim and I can talk all night, but so Margaret River was really put on the map first and foremost for Chardonnay and Cabernet, but what is really exciting us at Leeuwin at the moment is what we're doing with Shiraz. And it was one of our earlier plantings, but we worked out a few years into production that our original Shiraz was planted on the wrong site. That's now been grafted over and is the home for our finest quality Sauvignon Blanc. And then we went on a whole Shiraz journey where we didn't produce it for 10 years while we understood terroir, the cooler climate Shiraz, the style of Shiraz that we thought we could do best, that we liked best. We bought a new vineyard site further south from our original home blocks. And that has just been this ever-evolving learning journey. And to see the Shiraz where it is now is super exciting. So it's sort of the latter story of the varietal that we think that we can do fabulously with our sites in Margaret River. So we have the 19 tonight. So I'll let Tim talk you through that one.
I love this one. Firstly, and Shiraz has kind of taken on a bit of a different landscape, because it has been kind of a little bit held in the shadows of Chardonnay and Cabernet Sauvignon. So where we see Shiraz excelling is a vineyard that we own as an estate, as a family, a little bit further south, but a little bit further inland from the Indian Ocean. And what you gain with that is a greater diurnal temperature. So it's cooler nighttime, similar daytime, but as opposed to being planted closer to the ocean, the nighttime temperature will be a little bit warmer. And, our philosophy as a whole is to really, like, Shiraz is all about expression of aromats, its personality, its pepper, its spice, its florals, its perfume, almost getting into that kind of violet kind of nature. The fruit spectrum's kind of in, blueberry, kind of maybe raspberry, but blue and red fruits really kind of dominate for me. And Shiraz, to put it into context, is it's about balance. It doesn't have to be really big, deep, dark, rich. It just has to have, it showcases beauty overall. And I think that's what 19 is for me overall. And touching back on the oak, that was mentioned in like the volume of the oak for Chardonnay. This is where I and as a team, we stretch into a 600-litre format demi-mu barrel. So we want the fruit and the aromatics to be poignant. We don't really want to see oak. And by having a larger format barrel, that kind of really kind of weaves that kind of tapestry through, and it becomes second nature that you know, fruit and oak are together overall. And you know, when like I'm the biggest lover of the Rhone, and you know, the greatest kind of, you know, the end light is to be able to represent Shiraz in its truest format. And I don't think that there is any other region or appellation in the world that expresses Shiraz or Syrah in terms of its format with the Northern Rhone. So this is a true expression about taking all of the keynotes, tasting comparisons. We don't even look at Art Series Shiraz in a conversation with other Australian Shiraz examples. It's paying homage to the true custodians of the varietal, and that is the Northern Rhone. To split it, you know, look at Saint Joseph, look at Cornas, you know, yeah, Côte Rôtie maybe, but it's meant to be. It has this kind of vitality and energy to it without being overdone or too extracted. And I think there are a lot of examples coming from Australia which kind of like the bigger the better. It's like, no, that's not what Shiraz is about. It's about personality. It's about energy, life. It has to breathe. It has to kind of engage you on the nose. And then it comes down to the palate, which kind of, it takes you on a journey. It's life. And you know, I'm probably one of the biggest ambassadors of Shiraz in Margaret River, and I think in the cooler vintages, so moderates are cool, which is 2019. I think they're the best Shiraz years, because you have that kind of natural kind of pepper, spice, that kind of elevation overall without withstanding you know, any kind of lack of volume or capacity on the palate. And like Simone said before, it's about that length that you see and that sweetness of the fruit. And I think coming off Cabernet, which is so sophisticated, you see much more plump fruit, kind of mid to or front to mid palate, and then it just continues on. So yeah, with that slightly reduced aging in oak, so we're looking at about 18 months, but in larger format. So that's you know, focusing on the respect of the fruit and the timeliness on release as well. It's still cold soaked fermentation for 2 weeks, but I'll tend to press off pretty early on Shiraz just to keep a little bit more texture and weight to it. And yeah, just love the tannins. They're like, it's a really sweet fruited wine.
If I was not drinking the wine and all I could do was enjoy the aromas, this would be my pick. I just think the perfume on that wine is extraordinary. And then the structure, the layers and layers as they unfold, is a really pretty beautiful wine. And certainly for me, if I was having a red wine without any food, it would be my go-to. But also quite diverse in how it can be paired with food as well. So we think it's a very special wine in our portfolio, and it's the newest sort of story in what we've been doing. So we're pretty excited by it.
I have to say, I'm moving to the Southern Rhone at the end of March to live. And I have been on the lookout, I suppose, of wines that I could maybe take and show some Rhone producers. And the moment I tried this at lunch with you both, I thought, this is it. This is the wine. And I know I'm moving to the south, and it's definitely a Northern Rhone wine, but a lot of them produce wines in both places. And this is the wine I'm going to smuggle and try and trick some Northern Rhone producers with. So you've given me a fun project.
Anna, are you saying that you're moving to Avignon?
Near Avignon, yes. So
Beautiful.
I'm so envious.
Tim and I are going to Avignon next. No, you
Yeah.
Yeah. You bring the wine and we'll play trick the Northern Rhone producer. It'll be a fabulous game.
we will.
Oh, on that note, I have to say I'm so delighted we ran over. I love this Shiraz. I love all of the wines today. I think for me, what dumbfounds me is that you can produce these 3 varieties in the same part of the world at this quality level. And I think for me, that's what makes Margaret River really special, but particularly Leeuwin. I can't name you another producer that can do this. So for members who are not lucky enough to have tried any of the wines today, get your hands on at least 1 bottle. They all sing and are expressive and as beautiful as each other. So there will be a varietal for you, and there will be a wine for you in the Leeuwin range, as well as the Riesling, which sadly we don't sell, but that I absolutely adored at our lunch as well. So if you can get your hands on that, members, please do. Before I say a thank you as well, what I will say is if you did buy a tasting case, there is 10% on wines 2 through to 6, which were all launched on the website this morning. Like I mentioned, they are available in about half an hour, members. I'll send you the recording. I'll send you the links to all the wines. And then if you bought a pack, I'll also send you the discount code as well. So with that in mind, I'm going to raise a huge glass to Simone and Tim. I'm delighted that we made this project happen. I think there'll be plenty more projects at the Wine Society. I know that we've already been in conversation about potential opportunities when you guys are next over to do something in person. But in light of not being able to do something in person, this has been a perfect antidote to a very, very grey January day. It's been my absolute pleasure. And thank you both for giving up your Saturday evenings, which is unbelievable.
Absolute pleasure. Nice seeing you again, Anna. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all. And good evening to you two, and good afternoon, members.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Take care.